Welcome to the Groundswell Podcast. I'm Elliot Sands, Director of Faith First, and I'm with Chris Coursey, President of Thrive Today, the author of 10 books, many of them around using brain-based solution to help relationships work and to cultivate joy in our lives. Chris, thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Hey, thank you, Elliot. It's good to be with you today.
Yeah, I really have enjoyed reading through some of your content, your book, looking on your website, so I'm excited for this conversation.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. It'll be fun.
Yeah. Hey, give us a little background on you. Tell us where you're born, where you're raised, just, how'd you get where you are today?
So I was born in Peoria, Illinois, just, kind of born with cornfields, city and cornfields all around. And my mom faithfully took my siblings and I to church every Sunday, small little Baptist church. And no matter sleet, snow, rain, sunshine, didn't matter. Mom was going to get us to church, my siblings and I. And so I grew up, just had this love for God, love for God's word. A lot of good seeds were planted. And then as I got a little bit older, I drifted. And so when I got into high school, I got into college, I kind of drifted, what we would call in Michigan a rip current, kind of pulled me out a little bit. So it was in college, going to a university in Illinois, had a chance to go into sociology, psychology. And you know what? I just crashed in college, got a couple of DUIs within a year. And Elliot, my life, it just felt like my life was over. I come from a very loving family, have given a lot in life. I just feel like I just ruined it all. And I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. My whole world, my whole identity was based around this, this particular, just a wild lifestyle. And I got a call one day from an aunt who worked for a Christian ministry in Indiana, worked with severe trauma. And she said, Chris, why don't you come and do an internship with us? What else are you going to do? You can't drive, right? Why don't you come do the internship? And, who knows, maybe God will, give you some guidance or some leading. So I didn't know what I was getting into. I just thought, well, yeah, here's a chance to do something. So I went to this internship, and basically this was a people who just loved Jesus and prayed with people and studied scripture together and just really tried to find God in some of the hard places of their lives. And you know what? Watching this completely changed my life. God really faithfully got my attention, got a hold of me during that internship. I went back to school talking about Jesus and carrying around a Bible. So it profoundly changed me and transformed me. And I was like, I just, this God that I learned about and loved and, growing up, I discovered, wow, Jesus, Jesus is with us, and, his word is true. And it just changed me. And that put me on a particular course went on to get a master's in theology, joined this ministry for a number of years. And it was just, along the way there, I had a chance to meet a guy by the name of Jim Wilder. And this was a clinical psychologist, but, he was also an ordained minister, what we'd call a neurotheologian. So somebody who looks at, brain science and Bible and look at how did God make us? And he helped develop what's called the life model. And this started it all, Elliot. I mean, this is where my life just changed. And here I am 26 years later talking about joy and just trying to spread the good news of Jesus.
That is amazing. It's amazing when God meets us in our journey. Because like you say, when your parents take you to church, you just go. It's like, this is what we do.
Right.
And when he shows up in the midst of, whether it's the challenges, the difficult times, that he just becomes so real. And it's amazing when it goes from that, this was my heritage, to, now he's an actual real living God who actually cares about me and wants me to thrive and, wants me to serve him. Now I'm curious, right?
Yeah.
You've written a lot of books about joy now. You have a few under your belt. How did you end up in this career kind of helping people live joy? Why did you choose joy of all the things you could choose? What was it about that?
Well, you know what? When I got that second DUI, my friends came and they bailed me out. And I was angry at God, even though, I was the one making bad choices in my life. I was mad at God. I felt like, he's punishing me, and I was mad. And so I'll never forget, my friends bail me out. I'm walking out into the parking lot. I look up to the sky and I yell, "What do you want from me?" I just yell, just let it fly. And my friends were like, he's really lost it. Like, he's off the deep end now. But I was furious at God. And when I did that, I had this image in my mind that kind of surprised me. And the sense was, it was just a picture of Jesus, like standing right there with his arms out, like I would with my young son. Like, come here. Like, why are you fighting me? Why are you running from me? Like, just come here. And that picture was just a split second image of like Jesus, just like, why are you fighting me? Just come here. That went deep. I didn't quite know what to do with that, because I understood, I kind of saw God through my own distorted lens. I thought he was mad and spiteful and vengeful. But here's Jesus in my lowest point wants me to come to him. And it just really, it planted a seed in me that started to grow and just woke up this desire and this passion to, I really want to know this God, and I really want to be who he's created me to be. And the ministry, so they work with people who've had a horrendous trauma, lots of hard stuff happen in life, people who are just, many couldn't sit through a church service. They're just very broken. And one of the things that I was seeing during that internship was when people, the caregivers and the counselors would pray for these precious people, and they would have a sense of Jesus being with them in some of their, kind of dark, scary places. And they would say things like, why is Jesus glad to be with me? Shouldn't he be, kind of like what I felt? Shouldn't he be angry? Shouldn't he be anything but like really glad to be with me? And then when I met Jim Wilder, he was basically teaching on the brain science of joy and how the brain, this research was coming out in the 90s about how your brain runs on the fuel of glad to be together joy. So it's not happiness. Happiness is circumstantial, but joy is, Elliot, I'm glad to be with you here. And it's very genuine. And it's like when you walk into a room and somebody lights up to see you. So here is Wilder teaching all this brain science, as well as, as ministers. It's also like, well, what does the Bible have to say about joy? Because if the brain science is showing joy is like this important fuel, then I want to look in the Bible. I just want to understand what joy is.
Yeah.
So that's really what put me on this path. And then thinking about Jesus praying that his joy would be in us in John 15, and that our joy would be full. Wait a minute, this is sounding a lot like the brain science that I was hearing from Jim. So it really kind of put me on this path of really people growing to their God-given potential when they have joy, when they have people who are glad to be with them, and we have a God who's glad to be with us, who wants nothing to separate us from his love. And so this is where it's like, wait a minute, there's something here.
Yeah.
I want to learn more. And that's kind of what started me on this path of basically just trying to help Christ followers know, like, relational, glad to be together joy in our communities, in our small groups, in our families, in our marriages, like that is life-giving. And we follow a God who's glad, the good shepherd who's glad to be with his sheep. I just wanted to spread this message far and wide and really help people learn how to grow some joy in their lives.
Yeah. That's amazing. Now, how would you define joy? Now, again, you've written a lot of words on it already.
Yeah.
And so I'm asking you to boil down this concept. You've already said happiness is fleeting and of an experiential versus joy is something else. So give me some handholds. What can I grab onto around a definition of joy?
Okay. So joy is when you are the sparkle in someone else's eyes. So joy is, we are glad to be together. So it's when you'd see it on the face, you hear it in the voice, you see it in the mannerisms. So it's not so much about the words as far as like your brain. Joy is like a reflection or reflex in your brain. So it like, we respond to joy faster than we can consciously track what's going on. So it's like that baby that we see sometimes, right? I sit on airplanes a lot and I see the babies looking at mommy or looking at daddy, and you just, sometimes looking at people around them, and you just see faces light up. That's joy. So it's like when you feel like you're the sparkle in someone else's eyes, And it's more like a reaction. You just see it. You're going to get together with a friend you haven't seen in a number of years. When you walk into the coffee shop, you see them, they see you, and there's this spontaneous glad to be together joy. So that's really, as far as how God designed the brain, joy is we're glad to be together. I'm happy to be with you. I'm glad to see you. And there's something in us, like we feel that. We feel that at a very deep level. It's not the words so much. It's not something we've earned. It's just almost like this reflex that goes, wow, I see you light up when you see me, and I know I'm lighting up when I see you. That's genuine joy right there.
Got it. That is awesome. And like you're telling these stories, and I'm thinking of where, like, a few weekends ago, friends called us on Sunday morning and said, hey, my boss just gave me the cabin for the weekend. Y'all want to come up to the cabin? And like for the next 2 weeks, I was buzzing with joy on the inside. Like, I get to go to the cabin on the lake, which is awesome. And then additionally hang out with good friends. And you just feel that like it sustained, and like my weeks got really long because like the anticipation of being together, but also just that joy that came along with it. And anyway, and you just think
you got it.
Like, when you come home, like when I see a smile on my wife's face. My daughter's 18, so hopefully I see a smile on her face, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
But that connection you have. And
yes.
I loved what you said in the book, is you said neurologically joy is always relational.
Yes.
You touched on this already, but you kind of fill that in, and you even pointed out like one eye is more dominant relation than the other. Like, let's nerd out for a minute if you don't mind. Like, that was so cool.
This is a fun topic. So they've studied where on mommy's face does the infant look at more than anywhere else. So if the infant wants to know, is mom really glad to see me? Where does baby look on mommy's face? And they will track the eyes to see where is baby looking more than anywhere else. And babies look at the eyes to see if there's some genuine joy. So it's not the mouth, it's not the forehead, not the nose, it's the eyes. And joy really is we have a joy center in the right hemisphere of our brain. And so we have this right hemisphere, and there's a part of this engine in the right hemisphere that is all about joy, and it grows in response to joyful interaction. So every time you see a face light up to see you, this part of the brain responds, and brain scientists can actually scan your brain to look at, how much joy does this person have? So the right hemisphere, what's happening in the right hemisphere will show up on the left side of the face. So it's interesting that infants will track mother's left eye more than anywhere else on her face. So it's interesting to find out that the joy centers in the right hemisphere, what's happening in the right hemisphere shows up on the left side of the face. So if my aunt had a stroke years ago, she had a stroke in the right hemisphere, and that impacted the left side of her face, right? So there's this, that just kind of how that works. And so joy is something that is very fast. It's 6 cycles per second. So infants smiling at mommy, mommy smiling back. There's this little nonverbal joy exchange at 6 cycles a second, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And it's faster than we can consciously track. So the feeling baby just has, like, I just like how I feel when I'm with mom or dad. And the parent, like, I like how I feel when I'm with my baby. And so it's this relational, almost like a relational transaction where you see that I'm lighting up to see you, and you feel it, and I see your response. So it's like this exchange of glances and glad to be together. Next thing we know, we just had a little joy exchange. And when infants have had enough of this joy, they will look away to break eye contact for a breather. So I always tell parents, when baby looks away, that just means baby needs to catch her breath. She's had some great joy. She needs a breather. And when she takes a breather, she'll come right back for more joy. So it's this, you just see God's hand over this whole process of, the role of joy, the role of the face. Just, there's so many good things. Even Aaron's blessing that God gave Aaron the priest over Israel was, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May he lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. It's all about the face. It's all about God's face and God's countenance. It's just amazing, Elliot. Like, this is what really lit a fire in me when I started to learn all of these things. I just wanted to learn more and just spread it, spread this far and wide, that we are made in God's image for relational, glad to be together joy.
Yeah, that is so cool. That is so cool. Now, another thing I loved kind of reading through, because we all have those, what I'm going to kind of call those more overwhelming expressive emotions: anger, fear, outrage, anxiety, kind of fill in the blank of some of those negative but strong emotions.
Yes.
And you literally had physical exercises we can do to help combat those emotions, and there was different exercises for different emotions and so on, whether it was breathing, or I felt ridiculous sitting in my backyard throwing my arms up.
Yeah, right.
But I had to start feeling better, so that was really cool.
Yeah,
so
good for you.
You told me to practice, so I figured I might as well practice and see if it actually works. And to tell us a little bit, what's the physical, like when we move our bodies, whether it's to go for a walk or to do these more kind of expressive things to help calm ourselves, what's the connection there between physical, emotional, and so on?
That's a good question. I often tell people the body is the canvas for the brain. And so what's happening here will show up in the body. And sometimes we're aware of it. So if I feel maybe some anxiety, I feel the fluttering of my heart, or the fluttering in my stomach, or the tightness in my shoulders. So there's this very intricate, intimate connection between the brain and the body. And so our body is always telling us a story. So that's why sometimes when we're mad, we shallow breathe, we hold our breath, we get tense, our heart races, adrenaline often follows. So part of being able to practice joy and rest really comes down to, how do I live in this body that God's given me? And how do I stay a non-anxious presence in this body? Because whatever I'm feeling will show up in the body. So I can learn a lot about my mental, emotional well-being by just tracking my body, going, you know what, I'm feeling tense. Like, why am I feeling tense? I'm feeling like I'm bracing here and I'm holding my breath. And it's also interesting, by the way, about 2/3 of us hold our breath when we get on our phone. So the moment we pick up our phone, about 2/3 of us hold our breath. And so there's this intricate relationship between the brain and the body. So in the book, we do a lot of different exercises, some simple, what we call 15-minute, brain science hacks, basically just little practices to help people begin to notice, how do I live in this body with God's peace and God's joy? And how do I make all of this work as God designed it? And so, that's what's really fascinating to learn about joy and rest, or what we call, peace, is that there's this relationship of high energy joy that kind of amps us up. But when baby looks away, that's where we need some quiet together. And so we all have this, we need this rhythm of high energy joy, connection, or play, and we need low energy rest. And that always shows up in the body. So I encourage people to start noticing the body. We don't tend to think about our body until something's wrong with it, or we see something we don't like. And so try to just notice, how's your breathing right now? How's your muscle tension? And start just paying attention to that. And when we do build joy, one of the questions I will often ask people is, hey, how did it feel to do that exercise? Like, we just built some joy here. How did that feel? What do you notice in your body? And the good thing that happens when we do this, Elliot, is we start to notice when we lose our joy, our peace. So whenever I start losing that in my body, I'm getting tense, I'm holding my breath, my muscles are tight, there's tension in my stomach, whatever it might be. It starts to alert us, like, oh, wait a minute, I got to get my peace back. And Jesus is the Prince of Peace. So he's actually his signature is peace. He's good at giving us peace when we lose it. And that's what I noticed in the population when I did my internship. People would encounter God's peace and presence, and you could see, like, almost, you just see this calmness come over their bodies. And I was like, wow, what is this? People, when they were aware of Jesus being with them, the effect was calming and peaceful, just kind of washed over them. Whereas before, they were tense, they were anxious, they were stressed, they were upset, whatever it was. There's peace there. So when we're aware of God's peace and God's presence, the effect of that is peace. And that's amazing, all right? Like, just God is really good at giving his children peace. And we live in a world where it's kind of hard to hold on to peace, and it's not getting any easier. So this is just, as Christ followers, really learning to build some joy in our lives and be able to find God's peace really changes everything.
Yeah. No, that's a great insight, because our world feels chaotic. It feels like it's speeding up. It feels like there's more division. And you can blame it on the fact that, we have more access to media than we did 50 years ago, or whatever those things are. Whatever the causes are, it is the reality of it. And
Right.
so it's really hard for me to live in peace amidst, so much of the, again, I feel like you can just name the 50 subjects, right? Like there's all kinds of them out there. And so learning, how do we live in peace in the midst of chaos? And that one of the things that I try to stay with is God is in charge. God is in control. He is over this. Nothing that's happening is surprising him. And so how do we now kind of live in the sovereignty of God, right? That God's there.
Yes, that's
And I
right.
love that I can feel my body, and I can feel that, yeah, I'm stressed out right now. Like, this is too much, and what's going on. And I think it's important that it seems to me that sometimes, whether it's in the Christian world or even the secular world, we leave out one portion of who we are. So I feel like in the secular world, we're very into emotional and physical, but we leave the spiritual behind.
Right.
And I think sometimes in the Christian world, we spend a lot of time on spiritual, a little on emotional, but not as much on physical.
That's right.
And somehow when we can
Nailed it.
integrate those three, and our physical, emotional, and spiritual lives are playing together nicely, it's not that you won't have struggles, but you're able to manage through them, work through them a lot better, because you're integrated the way God designed us, right?
Right. That's
So,
right. I love that.
Yeah. So I'm going to do another little subject here, nuance, which is our thought life. And, Paul tells us, hold your thoughts captive, that kind of concept. But can you give us an idea of the power of our thought life? You just talked about our physical bodies. Like, what's the power of our thought life as we navigate through the world, through joy, through anxieties, all that stuff?
That's such a good question. We talk about like attacking toxic thoughts in the book, and you're exactly right. Like our thoughts, we have to take our thoughts captive, right? Would be the biblical way of putting it. Like, part of being able to track what's happening between our ears, what's happening with our thoughts. Our thoughts can influence our behavior, our feelings. It can influence all kinds of good or bad. And so one of the interesting things that brain science has now pointed out is that even the things that we think can influence the DNA strands in our body. So even like thinking about the good stuff, thinking about God's gifts, remembering God's presence and God's peace in our lives, that actually your brain responds when you remember those moments. Your brain responds as though you are reliving the moment all over again. So like gratitude, we're to be a thankful bunch as Christ followers, right? Like we've been given everything as children of the King. And so just learning to be a thankful bunch, learning to remember those special moments, those special gifts that God's given us, and learning to share those stories really changes our thoughts, changes our emotions, changes our behaviors. And so the hard part, this is the part that takes a little bit of practice, is just learning to recognize when our thoughts start to go south, when we're losing our peace or we're losing our joy, we're worrying about something, or we're stuck in a pattern, a painful event that just like won't stop. I've often recently tell people, like, one of the reasons when we try to go to bed in our mind, our thoughts just keep racing and we're thinking about things we haven't thought about in years, or we're worrying about something. Part of that is we just need to take a little bit of quieting before bed. Like quieting is a skill that we talk about in the book. And so trying to take little times throughout the day, a minute here, 3 minutes here, 30 seconds, to just breathe and quiet and kind of calm your mind and your body. What happens is when it's time to go to bed, you'll be more peaceful, you'll be more relaxed. But if going to bed is the first time that I've quieted today, then guess what's going to happen? Your brain's going to say, hey, all right, now that you've stopped, let's talk about all this stuff I've been waiting to talk about with you all day.
Right.
And it's like, I just want to go to sleep. I don't want to, I don't want to deal with that.
Right.
So it helps to just hold on to remembering the good stuff. And when you look at the good stuff in the rearview mirror of your life, your brain expects good stuff around the corner, because your brain always looks back to predict what's next. So when we look at the rearview mirror and we remember God's presence, we remember God's gifts, we remember the good stuff, then your brain starts to expect the good stuff. But if I look back here and all I see is pain and a lack of joy and peace, and what's going to happen, your brain's going to expect and anticipate some of that right around the corner. So just learning to track your thoughts, learning to just pay attention, noticing, your thoughts always tell a story. And when we start to amplify joy and grow joy and share joy stories and all of that good stuff, it really changes our thinking, and it changes our feelings, and it does change our behaviors. It's so simple, as we talk about, it can sound so easy, but man, it's hard. It's hard when we're struggling with this stuff. Especially just, fear is easy to start and hard to stop. So when we see the news or we hear the news and we just start getting anxious or worried, that engine starts up fast, but it's really hard to turn off. And that's why, practicing some of these habits, as we call them, these joy habits, a little bit goes a long way, and it can influence our thinking and feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. That kind of makes me think about the stories that we tell in our families, right?
Yes.
Like, what are the stories that we're recalling? Are they the stories of the joy of things that have happened, or the challenges? Or even if you are talking about the challenges, is it how God showed up and took care of things? Like, what are the stories that we're speaking and recalling, let alone, of course, the ones that are going on in your head, right? Like,
yeah. Yes.
those sometimes don't come out of our mouth, but it's really interesting when you think about family. What are the stories we like to retell?
I love that.
This summer, we got to take a family vacation for a few days in Israel. We went to Jerusalem.
Ooh.
And woke up the first morning, and my daughter and I, it was my wife and daughter and I, we just started walking down the street, and we walked into this Orthodox church. And I was wearing shorts at the time, so it's pretty funny. The guys, gives me like basically a skirt to put on. Like, you can't go in with those shorts. He was totally cool, but he's like, yeah, you ain't going in with your legs showing.
Wow.
You go into an Orthodox church, and it's surrounded on all walls by paintings of the people that have come before them.
Yeah, that's good.
And I know, for coming from a Protestant perspective, like, is that idolatry? Is that, what's that all about? And it's not. It's a place of memory of, like, these are people that have gone before us. These are the saints. Right. These are the stories that have defined who we are now as today in 2023 as followers of Jesus. But we come from a long lineage of God showing up in our churches and in our lives. And so just those, I love that part about some of those traditions that really bring in stories of God's, goodness, of his redemption. And even in challenging, because there were some martyrs on the wall, like, you see people being martyred, and yet those are some of the stories they want to tell, because that's the story of God's redemption, the story of God's vision, right? So
that's great. That's right. Beautiful. I love that. Those stories really keep joy alive. You know what I mean? And those stories remind us who we are, remind us where we come from, the stories of God's family. I love that. I mean, you're spot on. We'll, in our household at the dinner table, often we will tell stories from our day, like, what were 3 joyful or, positive moments from your day, God's gifts from your day. But then for every 3 joy moments, we share one hard thing or sad thing, because the hard stuff happens, right? We're not talking about denying reality. Like, hard stuff happens, but we're sandwiching the hard stuff with the good stuff. So there's some nights my son say, I've got like 5 hard things from my day. And I'll say, okay, buddy, we want to hear them. But for every hard thing, you got to give us 3 good things. So what we're doing is we're acknowledging the hard stuff. As you said, some of those pictures and paintings, those are some hard stuff. But we're also amplifying the good stuff and reminding each other who God is and what he's done in our lives. So those stories are just, that's one of the best ways I think we can spread some joy, to be honest with you, is sharing those stories. Those are just so impactful.
Yeah. It's always a fun thing when we pull out like the old videos, right? You
Oh
know,
yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
remember when you were? And it's funny how all of a sudden everybody just gravitates to the TV, like, oh, remember that
Yeah.
weekend, or remember that
Yeah.
trip? And
Oh
then
yeah.
my parents like, well, you don't make those videos anymore. I'm like, oh, geez, I got to go back and make about 10 years worth of videos because I did probably stop when our
Yep.
daughter was 8. But
Oh yeah.
um, so I'm gonna kind of pivot us a little bit here because at Faith First we talk a lot about overcoming the things that divide us. Um, and so we've talked a lot about maybe how do we deal with just some of the challenges in the world and the divisions that we see around us. But do you have any tools that you would give to our listeners around what might we do to help kind of break down some of those divides? Some maybe that's some of the kind of standard, whether it's ethnic divides or socioeconomic divides. Like, do you have any? Is there any brain science around that?
Oh yeah, I love that question. You've set this up nicely. I wrote a book called The Joy Switch, which really talks about there's like a circuit breaker in your brain, and when it's working, it's on. Joy is available. We're relational. We can feel compassion for others. We can put ourselves in other people's shoes. When the switch goes dark and it goes off, then we go into what my colleagues and I call enemy mode. Enemy mode is when the people that I normally would enjoy feel more like enemies. And so there's this whole process of what happens. Like I could be having a great day talking to you, and then maybe somebody, if I'm driving, cuts me off on the road. My joy, temporarily goes out the window. I go into enemy mode. And so that other driver, I'm not feeling much joy for that other driver. Maybe they give me the hand gesture to tell me I'm number one. Now I'm really in enemy mode. And when we're in enemy mode, not only is joy not available in that moment, but we're not being the people that God created us to be. It's kind of like Adam and Eve hiding in the woods when they hear the sound of God walking, right? It's like, oh, wait a minute. Should we run to the one who can help us here, which would be relational mode, or should we go hide? So they go into enemy mode. And so there's these just lots of examples in scripture where we can see people like temporarily slipping into enemy mode. So with, a lot of the division, a lot of the pain, a lot of the hard stuff that's happening in the body and in the world, what you see in a lot of these examples are people who are stuck in enemy mode. I'm not getting back to relational mode. And so we can learn simple steps to get out of enemy mode. And what we call cake helps us identify if we're in relational mode or enemy mode. And cake just stands for curiosity. Am I curious right now? If I'm curious, I'm in relational mode. If I'm not curious, I'm likely in enemy mode. Can I feel appreciation? So the A in cake is appreciation. Can I feel some appreciation right now? I'm in relational mode if I can. And appreciation is just remembering those joyful moments. If I can't feel appreciation in my body, that I could be in enemy mode. And then the K in cake is for kindness. Do I feel like being kind right now or not? Relational mode, we want to be kind. We desire to be kind. In enemy mode, I don't care about kindness. I just want to win. I just want to come out on top. And then the E in cake is eye contact. So do I look people in the eye? Which is what I do if I'm in relational mode, or do I like either give people the death stare, or I just don't, I avert my gaze. I don't look at people. So with a little bit of practice, we can learn to recognize, am I in relational mode? Am I in enemy mode? And we can learn, like if we're going to do anything productive or meaningful, it just helps to understand enemy mode is not our best self. People feel like enemies. And so learning to help people learn this brain skill of being able to get back into relational mode, frankly, that would change a whole lot of stuff in our world and in our churches. That we, enemy mode, I'm focused on the problem. In relational mode, I'm focused on the relationships. So if we're not focusing on relationships, then there's a good chance we're probably in enemy mode and we're just spinning our wheels in the mud. So honestly, that would be one of the greatest skills I can think of to help people be able to stay relational, resourceful, creative, kind, loving, like the fruit of the spirit, right? Would be showing up when we're in that relational mode. Just being the people that God created us to be. And my mentor, Jim Wilder, and another guy wrote a book called Escaping Enemy Mode. That's another great resource to just learn about the state and learn how to get out of enemy mode so that we can be our best selves.
That's so good. What you just described there, just resonates with me because I can picture each of those letters and how where I am when I'm in good mode.
Yes, that's
right,
right.
versus enemy mode.
Yes.
And
Yep.
yes, that switch is flipped, like you say, sometimes, within the same day.
Yeah,
That is
that's right.
great. And I think it's stuff that we know intuitively,
Yes, it is.
but
That's
just
right.
to kind of be able to describe it like that. And then, like you say, how do we be introspective to note, oh my goodness, I've moved over to enemy mode right now. And
Right.
so I am not going to be the person that I want to be or that God wants me to be.
Yep.
And
Right.
how do I switch back out of that? So that's
Yeah.
great. Thank you. That was awesome.
Yeah.
My final kind of podcast question,
Okay.
and I'll let people find out where to get your stuff. But
Okay.
what's exciting you right now? Like what project, trend, Bible verse, something happening in your family? What's encouraging you right now in your world? What's going on that gives you
You
joy?
know, that's an excellent question. I think the thing that I've really been thinking a lot about is just learning to see what God sees. So when God sees people, when God sees some of the situations I'm navigating, or maybe some of the hardships my family's navigating, what does God see when he looks at these things? And I find that what he sees is always different than what I see. And so I preached a sermon a little while ago on the transfiguration, just how they got to, a couple of those disciples got to see Jesus and his glory, and how different the world looks when we're seeing things from earthly eyes or when we're seeing things from God's perspective. And just as Christ followers, and just for me in my personal life, I want to continue to grow in that skill of just seeing what God sees when he looks at people in situations or trials or struggles. And that's really like the path of peace. And so I'm working on growing that skill and helping my sons who are 11 and 13 and my wife. We're practicing these skills and just trying to improve and trying to be able to learn these habits so we can do them. So honestly, that's kind of what's been lighting a fire in me these days, just trying to practice that skill and get a little better at it.
That is so good. That is so good.
Good question.
It makes me think of a verse, and I can't. Paul wrote it. I can't tell you what book it's in,
Yep.
but he says to lift your eyes up to the throne, and I love that idea because we so often get caught up in the weeds on the ground in front of us, and the weeds don't go anywhere. But I can stare at weeds all day long. But there's times where I have to get God perspective, and when I lift my eyes up, and for me, I do it physically sometimes and look at the sky. I have a window in
Oh
front of me here,
yeah.
so
I
I can
love
look to
that.
the sky and it just changes my perspective. Again, the weeds didn't go away, but now I'm starting to hopefully see, one, that God's a big God, but two, how does God see these weeds? Like, how does God
Yes.
see these circumstances that I'm in the midst of? So I
Love
love
that.
that. That is so great. I think you might have just won on the best answer so far
Oh
for that
wow.
question. So
Oh goodness. Well,
I love
you
it. I
set
just
it
did
up. You set it
it.
up.
That's
Good
awesome.
question.
Chris, where can people get your resources? Give us a little info there.
Yeah, so the website for the organization and ministry that my wife and I run is called Thrive Today. So it's all one word, thrivetoday.org. And we have videos, we have, what are relational skills, all kinds of good stuff, thrivetoday.org. And we have a 28 days to joy free resource at number4habits.org. So just number4habits.org. 28 days to joy. They're 5-minute exercises, very simple. You can download them and just do some simple exercises. So those would be the two websites I think probably would be helpful.
Awesome. We'll get all of that in the show notes. So if you're driving right now, don't stop and write it down. Just go back to the podcast and we'll put that there. So Chris, thank you so much for being on the Groundswell podcast. I loved this conversation. It's been so great. So thank you for being with us today. And for everybody, go out there today and let's live faith first.